Imagine for a second you're in a European city in the middle of summer. But instead of the sounds of a marketplace, you hear something else. A relentless, frantic rhythm. And you see people. Not a few, but hundreds of them dancing. Not for joy, not for a festival, but because they can't stop. Their feet are bloody. Their eyes are wild with fear and exhaustion. And they're literally dancing themselves to death in the streets. This isn't the plot of a horror movie. It's a historical fact. It's known as the Dancing Plague of 1518. And to this day, no one knows exactly why it happened. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most bizarre and unsettling events in medical history. Our story begins in July 1518, in the city of Strasbourg. Back then, it was part of the Holy Roman Empire. Today, it's in modern-day France. But in 1518, life here was anything but picturesque. For the people of Strasbourg, this was a time of extreme hardship. The region had been ravaged by consecutive crop failures, famines, and outbreaks of terrifying diseases like smallpox and the bubonic plague. Despair hung in the air like a fog, and the population was deeply superstitious. It was in this pressure cooker of fear and suffering that something in the human mind seemed to snap. It all started with a woman named Frau Troffea. On July 14, 1518, she walked out of her house and began to dance in the street. There was no music, no celebration, just a silent, fervent, and terrifying compulsion. She danced for hours without stopping. She collapsed from exhaustion, only to resume her frantic jig after a brief rest. Initially, you might imagine people laughed or just thought she was strange. But Frau Troffea didn't stop. She danced for nearly a week, almost without pause. And that's when it got truly scary. Within days, her private nightmare had become a public contagion. First, 36 others joined her in the chaotic dance. Then the numbers swelled. By August, an estimated 400 people were consumed by this same uncontrollable compulsion. Whirling and swaying through the streets of Strasbourg, it was as if a spell had been cast over the entire city. Now, this is where the story takes an almost unbelievable turn. The city's authorities were completely baffled and, frankly, terrified. They had to do something. So they turned to the leading medical experts of the day. And the physicians, following the medical theories of the time, came to a simple conclusion. The dancers were suffering from overheated blood on the brain. So what was the logical cure? To dance it out, of course. The thinking was that by continuing to move, the afflicted could shake off or burn away this bad blood. And I mean, they really committed to this idea. In what might be the worst case of a doctor's advice backfiring in history, the city council did everything they could to encourage the dancing. They cleared out the guild halls and the grain market to give the dancers more space. They constructed a massive stage next to the horse fair. They hired professional dancers and musicians, pipers and drummers, to whip the crowds into an even greater frenzy. And perhaps most disturbingly, they even paid strong men to physically hold up exhausted dancers who had collapsed, forcing them to keep moving. The very measures meant to cure the plague only accelerated it. The dancing continued for weeks, and the inevitable happened. People began to die. Dancers collapsed from sheer exhaustion, succumbing to strokes, heart attacks, and fatal fatigue. While some sources claim that up to 15 people a day were dying at the peak of the plague, the official city records from the time are silent on an exact number. This wasn't a joyful festival. It was a mass casualty event happening in slow motion. By the beginning of September, the authorities realized their more dancing cure was a catastrophic failure. They pivoted hard. Deciding this was not a medical issue but a divine punishment, they switched to a spiritual solution. They concluded the plague was a curse, likely from Saint Vitus, a saint who was often associated with nervous disorders and, ironically, dancing. The new plan was one of penance. The music and dancing in the city were banned, and the afflicted were loaded onto carts and taken on a pilgrimage to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, located in a grotto in the hills near the town of Saverne, about 30 kilometers away. At the shrine, a strange ritual unfolded. The exhausted and injured dancers were given small crosses to hold. Their bloody, blistered feet were placed in red shoes, and a mass was said over them. They were then led in a procession around a wooden figurine of the saint, praying for absolution. And remarkably, for many of them, it worked. The dancing began to subside. By late September, the deadly plague was over as mysteriously as it had begun. So, what the hell caused this dancing plague? It's a question that has baffled historians, doctors, and scientists for over 500 years. And over time, several compelling theories have emerged. First theory: divine wrath and demonic possession. This was the popular explanation at the time. People truly believed that supernatural forces, perhaps a curse from an angry saint, were to blame. Second theory is ergot poisoning. One of the most famous modern theories is ergot poisoning. Ergot is a toxic fungus that grows on damp rye. Consuming it can cause convulsions, hallucinations, and a burning sensation in the limbs that could make you feel like you need to move. However, the continuous, days-long dancing doesn't perfectly match the symptoms of ergotism, making many scholars skeptical. Third theory: religious cult. Some have suggested the dancers were part of a heretical sect performing some sort of ecstatic ritual. But historical accounts clearly show the dancers were in agony and not engaged in worship. Another theory is mass psychogenic illness. Today, this is the most widely accepted explanation. Historian John Waller, who wrote an entire book on this event, argues that the dancing plague was a massive outbreak of mass psychogenic illness, what we often call mass hysteria. Think about the context. The people of Strasbourg were living through what felt like the end of the world. Starvation, plague, and extreme poverty created unimaginable levels of stress and despair. In a deeply superstitious culture, this collective trauma manifested as a physical, psychosomatic symptom, the uncontrollable urge to dance. It was a tragic, shared psychosis born from a community pushed past its breaking point. The dancing plague of 1518 remains one of history's most chilling unsolved mysteries. It's a stark reminder of the power of the human mind, especially under extreme pressure, and a window into a world vastly different from our own. While we might laugh at the idea of a dance fever today, the desperation and fear that fueled it are emotions that transcend time. Thanks for watching this deep dive into the dark side of history. If you want to support the channel and see more stories like this, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps us out. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an episode. Now, I want to hear from you. Which theory about the dancing plague do you find most convincing? Was it mass hysteria, a bad batch of bread, or something else entirely? Let me know your theory in the comments below. I can't wait to read them. As always, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next video.